during times of change. Leaders explain why change is required. They focus on the end goal. So what we're going to do is we'll also focus on the key communication skills that facilitate change and motivate those who are resistant to change in the first place. So in effect, those who lead inspire change. Okay, so we get that inspiration part of the leadership, very important in times of change. So when it comes to change management, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it is to act with yesterday's logic. Okay, so we have to be aware of our organization's current situation, and if we do need to manage change, we have to come up with a new plan, new strategy, new logic for today's market. Okay, and that's where we need to be strong in change management. So to give you a little example, there's a good story about Gandhi, okay? A woman asked Gandhi to speak to her son about eating sugar, okay? Now, Gandhi asked her to come back in 2 weeks and said he would talk to the boy then. So a couple of weeks passed and they returned, and after waiting a couple of hours, she was able to approach Gandhi once again. So Gandhi immediately spoke to the boy, who agreed to begin working to eliminate sweets and sugar. And after thanking Gandhi for his wise and compassionate words, the mother asked him why he wanted them to return instead of offering his advice the first time they came. And Gandhi basically said, upon your visit 2 weeks ago, I too was eating sugar. So Gandhi famously said, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. So in this lesson, we will look at what is meant by change, some of the skills required to manage change successfully, and then in addition, what we're going to do is look at the barriers to change and how we can work with those who are resistant to change. Then what we're going to do is look at how to successfully implement change and the importance of communication throughout the change management cycle. Okay, and hopefully once we've done that, you will understand a little better the importance of communication in change management. So people tend to have a tough time with change, and there's two common reasons why change programs in organizations tend to fail. Okay, the first one is that senior managers don't act as role models for change. They just simply don't act as role models or look like they're leading the change. The second one is employees in the organization fear change. Now, if you think about maybe a company you've been in, or previous experience of change within maybe the organization or processes or how they were dealing with customers, think about your experience. Was it successful or was it a failure for the company? And just as a whole, when it comes to morale and it comes to employees, was it successful and was it a failure? And get a conversation going in your peer chat there and have a chat to see, you know, essentially a little bit of feedback on the percentage of people that were successfully in one and maybe unsuccessfully in one. But, you know, people don't resist change. They resist being changed. This is why we have to lead change, okay? So thinking about that, and with that in mind, let's look at some of the common reasons for resistance to change, okay? The first one is misunderstanding the need for change. Okay, misunderstanding about the need for change is the most common reason for resistance. If your staff do not understand the need for change, you can expect resistance straight away, especially from those who strongly believe the current way of doing things works well and has done for a very long time. So if you have employees or frontline managers who essentially are not buying into your change, you're going to have a massive amount of resistance to that change. The next common reason is fear of the unknown. Okay, people will only take active steps towards the unknown if they genuinely believe that the change will improve the organization, the employees, and the organization as a whole. Okay, so think about the Simon Sinek again. You know, why? Have we explained the why? Do people understand the why? If we don't understand the why, we're not going to be very successful at changing the processes. And this leads us to low trust or previous attempt to change. Okay? So when people don't believe that they or the company that they work for can competently manage the change, there is likely going to be a lot of resistance. And you see this in companies who consistently try and change maybe their customer retention or their customer processes, and because they don't plan it properly, don't get the buy-in properly from their employees, and don't actually successfully implement the changes over a specific timeline, then people are very resistant to change because they feel like they don't have the leaders that are able to properly manage that change. And then lastly, guys, the big one for me is poor communication and lack of consultation. So when it comes to change management, there is no such thing as too much communication. If people are allowed to be part of the change, there is less resistance. People like to know what's going on, especially if their jobs may be affected. And this comes to any change within an organization, even simply within your team. Even if you know the change needed, if you bring it to your team and go, listen guys, we need to solve this problem. We're having this problem with our customer process or our customer retention or our sales conversions. We need to fix this problem. How do we actually do that? Now, if you already know the answer, but you bring it to your team and allow them to bring you the answer, then you can actually have an open conversation about how you guys are going to successfully put that process in place. So even if you know the answer, you want your team's feedback. Trust me, they probably know the answer as well. So it is about communication. Because if you look on the right, here's the classic psychological reactions to change. Okay, we have denial. So people essentially just, especially with a company that's tried it before, but like, yeah, they're going to try and change the retention system again, but don't worry, they haven't bothered the past 4 times, okay? So you get that. Then you get anger, confusion, and depression. Okay, now those 3 is where we get the rumors starting around the office. So we get silly rumors about why it's starting, the company's going out of business, we don't have any money left, everyone's going to lose their jobs, and it starts to seriously affect the morale. Okay, then we get crisis where people are actually talking about and actively then looking for jobs to leave the organization. And then eventually, if you successfully get through that, because you didn't communicate properly, and people start to see the process working, we start to get acceptance and new confidence in the new processes. Now, we don't have to go through those first few stages if we properly communicate with the staff and the frontline managers. Okay, so in my experience, if you properly communicate the change, the why we need to do the change, and get the buy-in of the process from your employees, from your frontline managers, from your floor staff, about why we need to do it, we can actually skip a lot of the negative reactions and go straight to acceptance and new confidence. Go straight to acceptance, go straight to implementing the process, and then seeing it work will create that new confidence and that new better morale on the organization floor. So let's look at that. Let's look at, how do we do that? How do leaders identify and address these mindset issues from the outset? And, if we do that, we're 4 times more likely to succeed. Okay? So let's look at it. And there's 3 main areas that we need to do really well as leaders to manage change effectively. The 3 main areas are get buy-in early, have absolute clarity, and focus on the front line. Focus on the frontline staff, focus on the frontline managers. So if we look at the first one, get the buy-in early. Staff implementing the changes need to see where we are today and where we intend to go tomorrow. Okay, so leaders need to show why this change matters. We have to show people the why and how it will positively impact their careers, the staff, the organization, our customers, and how we plan to measure the success of this new change. Now, if you do that, that is a huge step because you're getting the buy-in from the employees, from the frontline managers, and you can stop worrying about those first few negative psychological reactions to change. The second thing we have to have is absolute clarity, okay? What will success look like if we make these changes for ourselves, for the customers, for each member of staff? Why are we trying to solve the problem? What resources and relationships do we need to put in place for the plan to succeed? Have we left anything out? Do we need to get more feedback from our frontline staff? We need absolute clarity, and we have to be so willing to take the feedback from the staff that will be implementing this change. Because no matter how good we think it is, especially our hardworking, talented, skillful, competent frontline staff will know if there's maybe some gaps in the plan change that we have. All right. And then lastly, guys, we have to focus on the frontline managers, on the frontline staff, on the exact actions they need to take to achieve the desired business outcomes. And for this to happen, frontline managers need to be prepared to do three things. One, they have to understand what the change is. They have to understand. So we have to explain it to them before we explain it to everyone. Second, we need to understand what the barriers to change will be. Now, the frontline managers will have a better idea of what feedback and what barriers we're going to get than leaders and senior management, because they deal with the floor staff on a day-to-day basis. And third, we need to know the barriers to change. We need to construct a plan to overcome those barriers, and we need to achieve the desired objective. Guys, the frontline managers will be the first to hear the feedback from the teams. So if it's negative, they're the first to hear it. If it's positive, they're the first to hear it. So we need to make sure they are 100% clear about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the positive impacts are going to be for them, for their staff, for the floor staff, for the revenue generation, for future promotions, for future opportunities, for better, more flexible hours, everything that's positively going to affect them. We need to make it clear. And we have to get a buy-in. There has to be a reason for them to do it, you know? Now, guys, once we get the actual buy-in, there's a couple of important things we need to do during the change process, okay? One is listen to feedback, and two is to acknowledge and respond to feedback from the team, the organization, the floor staff, and so on. So if we look at the first one, when it comes to listening to feedback, the team's voice must be heard. These are your frontline staff. These are implementing the changes. These are implementing the processes that's going to improve building value with our customer. And we already said it. The chances are that most people on the team or in the organization not only know that this change is necessary, but also they've probably been begging for this change for a long time and know that it's actually needed. And they probably know what is actually needed to be successful with it. So getting their feedback will actually assist in a smooth transition and gaining their buy-in even more. Okay? Now, by explaining the need and the why, especially for change, and getting feedback throughout the change process, it will hold everyone accountable and help us maintain that alignment, that one goal, that one vision, of course, which is build value with the customer. Now, when it comes to responding and acknowledging the feedback, collecting feedback from the team is important. But even more importantly is acknowledging and responding to the feedback. Okay? So after each part of the change process, we need to get that feedback. We need to acknowledge that feedback, and we need to do a quick plan, do, check, act, little bit of a process with the team. Okay, so the leadership team have to reflect on that feedback, tell the team what they're hearing from the feedback, and then have some sort of action in place to be taken, either to improve the implementation of the change or just to continue the good momentum of the change. So leaders have to have a plan in place to actually publicly reward those that make the time and the effort to also embrace the change. Especially those staff members that do it with a great attitude, get the other team members on board, and really help that change become very easy within the organization. Because keeping the team properly motivated is probably the most important thing to seeing full-scale adoption of those changes. Okay, guys? So that's so important that when it comes to listening to feedback and responding and acknowledging the feedback, we do it properly. And again, we have to do it with genuine attitude and with genuine honesty and genuine clarity. So you have to be, we have to be transparent. There's no point in, again, agreeing to feedback going, yeah, that's a great idea, but we don't actually agree with it because it doesn't align with the actual goal that we're going for. So we're obviously not going to be yes men and agree to every single bit of feedback, and that's where the communication comes into play very effectively. Yeah? We get that, guys? So hopefully everyone's clear now on how leaders must listen and respond to feedback, okay? And when feedback has been acknowledged and acted upon, it really is a game changer, guys. People really start to trust their leaders and trust in them being able to implement and lead that change. Now, if we do those few steps effectively, what we're actually doing as leaders is facilitating the change by being adaptable in the change process. And we can actually prepare for these steps by doing a few things. One, by understanding the scope of the project. This means taking the time to understand the changes that are going to be happening in the organization and set the priorities that will guide us through the change process. So understanding the barriers, understanding the sheer size of the project, and understanding what we have to do as a whole to actually succeed in it. The next thing is decide on a fairly exact course of action and then be willing to adapt in the change process. So deciding on a course for the changes that are occurring and mapping them out for each person in the organization and what they have to implement to make sure that we get that full implementation throughout the organization of the change we want. So it's not just about mapping out frontline managers and then hoping they map out all of the changes for then our floor staff. We have to have a full conversation with everyone who's implementing the change and then decide on a course for every single person. The third thing is we have to begin the change. Okay, we have to begin to implement the change as leaders, just like Gandhi at the start. We must be the change we want to see in the world. This requires focusing on who is most affected by the new business processes and requires leaders to focus on those individuals if they want this progress or process to progress smoothly. So we have to understand who in the organization is this going to affect the most. We have to understand how is this going to affect the customer. So our changes, again, aligned with the business goals, and then we have to start making it happen. We have to start actually leading the change from the front line ourselves. And then, guys, we have to be adaptable. We have to be adaptable in the change process based on our communication. The final step for an organization that is undertaking any change will be the fact that they need to evaluate and adjust any changes necessary based on the feedback from their frontline staff. So leaders need to have the skills to identify which developments have been effective in implementing the process and which have not, and revise those initiatives that are maybe holding the entire team back or the entire organization back to successfully implement the full change. So again, it's utilizing that plan, do, check, act cycle every time we get feedback when we get to another stage of the full implementation. And we should have a maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 step, course of action that we're trying to do over maybe on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, depending on obviously what you're trying to do. So when it comes to your organization, are you trying to improve conversions? Are you trying to improve retention? Are you trying to improve your customer acquisition? What order do you need to do that in? Can we do it all together with different departments? And then can you actually plan that course out as a whole for each person on the floor in each department? So there's a huge amount that we have to be able to do as leaders when it comes to our skills and our competencies to make sure that we can map this out and get the buy-in from everyone involved in the change, and then we have to lead it ourselves from the front. So guys, let's look at how we can lead that change in a little more detail on a day-to-day basis. So remember Sonic Cynic, again, getting the why, getting the buy-in. People don't buy into what you do. They buy why you do it. If you talk about what you believe, you will attract those who believe what you believe. So again, it's showing your passion for that change, for that process, for that goal, which is always about building value, and how that's going to improve the organization, the employees, and everything as a whole. So what the leaders do in time of change, they engage. And remember we talked about how important engagement is between leaders and between your employees, your floor staff. If you're not engaging with your employees, it's very hard to build trust. If you don't have trust, it's very hard to lead anything. So what effective leaders do during times of change is to engage with those where the change is going to have the biggest impact. So the first thing they do is leaders check in regularly with employees, okay? And they ensure that employees are on board with the change and clarify any issues we're having on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and maybe at each stage of the process. Okay, so you have to be checking in on a regular basis. You can't just be saying, right, here's the change and ignore it and hope it happens over a quarter or a 6-month period. We also speak to the changes impacting that person. Okay, so some people are going to be impacted more with their day-to-day job than others when we're implementing any type of change. So we have to make sure that we're very upfront about how change is actually impacting those people. And we need to show them that we're not disengaging from staff. So tell them that their role is important to the overall change process, why we need to make these changes in their role, and what is the easiest and best way for us to do this together. Okay? We also need to address the challenges of those changes. You know, if we address any challenge that arises from any changes in that process, it keeps their manager in the loop as well. So it allows us to have true feedback, true transparency between leaders, managers, floor staff, to make sure that we have a very easy back and forth when it comes to implementing change as a whole for the organization, but also each person in their individual role. Okay? And then we have to adjust when necessary. Leaders will adjust when necessary and still keep the vision and the alignment of everyone's part of that process all together in a positive nature. So, you know, we have to accept if we're making mistakes or it's negatively affecting people, what we can do to actually help that along or improve that situation, because we need to make sure that the change as a whole works in every area of the organization, especially if it involves a number of different departments. Because if we have 3 or 4 departments that all have to make changes to implement our end goal when it comes to building value for our customer in our new process, and we have one department just not happy with it, not doing well with it, not finding it easy, we have to figure out, was that caused from the plan we put in place, or is it caused from the way we're leading them? So, you know, most likely we're going to have strong people in each department, so we have to be talking to those people, finding out how it's impacting their role on a daily basis, and what is the best way to approach implementing that change long term. Because otherwise we're in danger of either not successfully implementing all the changes and also losing people while we try and implement change. So there's a few things we can do to make sure that we break down resistance to change and make sure that people understand that we value them in this change process. So John C. Maxwell suggests a number of ways to break down resistance to change. So it's pretty much here on the slide, guys. I'm going to go through it 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. The first one is we have to start with compassion by meeting people where they are. You know, people are always scared when it comes to the unknown, okay? So you have to listen. You have to show empathy. You have to take time to truly connect with those people. And you have to resist the impulse to say, look, we just need you to do this. Because, you know, we don't know what impact that change is going to have on their family life, on their work-life balance, on the way they may feel it will have on all of that, on their background, on their concerns. So we need to find the opportunities for those one-to-one interactions. And we need to make sure that moments of connection are the most important ones in your day when we're leading change. So whether it's speaking to maybe staff members that you normally haven't spoken to maybe on a daily basis or a weekly basis, because they're a very important part of the actual change process, or making sure that their managers are really communicating and engaging with those staff and doing those regular check-ins and making sure that we're taking that feedback, acknowledging that feedback and adjusting as we need to. The second thing we need to do is make sure we influence the influencers. We need to pay attention to group dynamics. Who's influencing the rest of the floor and who on each team is influencing that team, because these people hold the keys to the kingdom. Okay, if we can identify these and focus our energy on making sure that they have a complete buy-in at the change process, and on a daily basis they're coming in with a positive attitude towards that, change process, then 80-90% of the battle's done, because they're going to lead that change for us as well. Okay. The third thing we need to do is we have to communicate the values. Okay. So again, does our values of a change match the values of our culture, of our organization, of our customer, of our employees? You know, and make sure we don't withdraw when we encounter conflict. Remember, it's not personal. This is business, but people do take it personally. Okay, so we can't deal with resistance unless we understand why we're getting resistance. And you're not going to earn the buy-in until you understand people's reservations in the first place and the reasons why they're actually resisting the change. So, you know, you have to reassure people that your principles are positive and show where your values align with theirs. Because remember, when we're recruiting people, we're trying to recruit people into our culture. So they've come on board believing in our values. So if we talk about changing our culture or changing our values for an end goal, we have to make sure that our employees are buying into that and why we're doing it and what positive effect it's going to have. Okay. The key is to be steady, positive, consistent about all of this. Okay, we can't just tell them to go and do it if we don't know if they believe in it yet. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, but just be sure to fix them at a faster rate than you make them. And then lastly, guys, when it comes to breaking down resistance to change, it is about creating wins early, okay? And really celebrating those wins, recognizing and rewarding those wins. Remember we talked about recognition and rewarding as well. So never underestimate the power of early victories. This gives people confidence in pushing them forward and continue to pushing them forward with that change. And equipped leaders and future leaders to develop these in the organization. You know, find your future mentors. Find your future leaders. This is a great time to find your future senior managers, because you'll see who really helps you implement that change. And those people are now going to be your future leaders because they've helped change the organization to where we're trying to go with our new end goal. So make sure you find them, you coach them, you give them the resources they want, because they are the next generation of your leaders. Does that make sense, guys? We're kind of getting that, yeah? Breaking down, I mean, it's huge. It's so much about communication. So much about communication. And again, guys, we have to make sure that people can visually see where we're going. It's not just actually understanding why, but also them being able to visualize where they're going to be in the 3-month, 6-month, 12-month period if we do implement all this change in the organization. So leaders must lead change, and we have to walk the talk. We have to walk the talk. So there's a couple of things we can do with each department and each individual to help this along. Okay, the first thing is maybe a little bit of a vision workshop. So we have to create a change story together. So from all that feedback, from the initial idea of the change and why we're doing it, now we have to figure out kind of what's the vision going forward for us all together to make sure we're aligned with that goal. And we have to call out all of the reasons for why we're initiating the change in the first place. Now remember, most of these reasons your employees probably already know and have wanted to be implemented for a long time. So all we have to do then is make sure that, look, we can all see that alignment and we're willing to adapt and tailor that story to resonate each part of the business that needs to change. So we have that main vision of the new change, and now we need to adapt it for each department to tailor it for them so they can visually see where they're going to be in quarter 1, 2, 3, 4 of next year, whatever it may be. And then the second thing is, guys, we have to own that vision. So as leaders, we need to embrace the new vision and changes. We can't just delegate it on to our kind of maybe department managers or floor managers or frontline managers. Yes, it's very, very important they are going to be leading the change with us. But let's say you're in a senior management role or you're in a more senior leadership role where maybe the floor staff don't see you on a daily basis. During change, they should be seeing you a lot more. You should be involved in maybe morning huddles. You should be walking around talking to people that are maybe struggling with this change or feel like it's impacting their department more or their individual job more. And you should be making sure that you're communicating with these people and showing them that you care about them being able to implement this change successfully in a way that they're happy with. So show your passion about the change, guide others at every opportunity until that change is complete, and then help your future leaders to push that change and keep that momentum going when you're not around. But you're going to have to be more visible on a daily basis, especially if you're in a more senior role where people aren't used to seeing you. You need to be able to step up and lead that change with your frontline managers. That makes sense. Tell the story about the need for change. That's it. And keep doing it on a daily basis until people believe it. You know, we talk about the culture. We talk about living the culture. We have to keep telling the story of that change so that becomes the new culture. Yeah? So it's all about communication, guys. It's all about communication. All right? So 5 steps when it comes to working with teams, working with organizations that we need to be able to do effectively to communicate the change process. Okay, number 1 is the feedback. Okay, providing feedback, focusing on supporting the desired cultural beliefs and desired outcomes to the team members is critical for success. It's critical for success. So we have to provide feedback with them to where we are in that change process. Okay, the second thing we need to do is we need to be able to hear the team's voice and take constructive criticism. Remember, these are the guys dealing with our customers. They're our frontline staff. They're probably going to see issues before we do. Okay, so this is why it's so important to listen to their voice. So teams may be able to see a better way to proceed with the process if they find it's just simply not working in one way or another directly with the customer. So we need to be able to take that constructive criticism, and then we need to be able to be adaptable to do that. The next thing we need to do is make sure that we don't dismiss fears. Okay, when teams feel like they're not being listened to throughout a change process, that's when the rumor mill starts, and that's when we start to see those first few stages of psychological reactions to change that we don't want to see, the negative reactions to change. Okay, so listen to the team's fears. Even if they're not real and not grounded in reality, we have to be able to lead that change positively as from the front. So we have to listen to those fears, alleviate those fears, even if it's a case of, look, they've built some up in their head of a future problem that could happen from the changes. Now, there's no proof whatsoever that's going to happen. You know, simply sitting down with a certain department going, listen, that's a problem that we haven't seen, we haven't anticipated, and we understand your fear on this, but let's just try it out, because we're not going to blame you if that happens, and what we will do is come up with a solution. Because we truly think that this change is going to work. But if you think that will happen, well, listen, what do you think is best to move forward on it? And, you know, simple communication will alleviate some of the fears. Take the time to allow the idea of change to embed itself within the organization and departments. Okay? Be patient, be positive every day. You know, let people vent a little bit once it's not creating a negative morale on the floor. You know, you have to walk the talk and lead the change. Now, you're going to get some resistance no matter how good you are at communicating. You're going, because people get in their comfort zones. People don't like to leave their comfort zones. So give it time, be patient, and allow it to change. Just keep walking the talk. And then lastly, guys, be sure to celebrate the early successes. Okay, and look for them. Look for those early successes. Even if the job isn't complete, the right behavior even does it. So people staying late to get the job done, people giving that extra effort in certain processes that maybe have been, you know, neglected for a long time. Look for the positive changes and reward and recognize the people who positively lead that change for you. Okay, that's what we have to be doing. But keep celebrating the early successes and keep people up to date. It's all about communication, guys. Look at all of this. This breaks down if we stop communicating. Don't be sending emails. It's face-to-face, okay? It's face-to-face when it comes to change. So what we really have to do is we really have to make sure that our frontline managers understand about team building during change and change management. So it's vitally important that, look, when it comes to respect, clear expectations, role changes, acknowledgements, poor performance, and praise and reward, we know how to deal with all of this throughout the change process. So when it comes to the respect side of it, guys, treat all of your staff with courtesy and respect. Okay? You should be respectful for the journey they're all undertaking. And I always say, look, treat everyone like the CEO. Whatever way you would treat the CEO, treat everyone like that. Because that's how everyone wants to be treated. Yeah? Or simply treat people the way you expect to be treated. Okay? Don't talk down to them. Don't snap at them. Don't be too quick or short with them. Don't be too dismissive. Treat them the way you would like to be treated and communicate with them properly. Have very clear expectations. You've talked about the vision. You've talked about the strategy. Now make sure you have a clear plan of action in place and explain how we're all going to get the job done. All right? Very, very simple. But a lot of this is not done in most companies when it comes to change management. Okay? When it comes to role changes, take time with each team member and make sure that you explain what the changes means for them and what you think they think the changes means for them. Because you have to understand, what you expect of them when it comes to this change, and two, what they expect what effect it's going to have on them. Because again, we have to have that empathy, we have to have that back and forth, and we have to make sure that we are alleviating fears, because stuff can build up very quickly in some people that aren't good at dealing with stress, which, if we just communicate properly, is a non-issue. Okay, so make sure that when it comes to role changes, we really are taking the time to explain on an individual basis to every single person in the organization. Whether it's yourself doing it, whether it's their frontline manager, whether it's both, make sure you're taking the time to really talk to those people. Okay? Again, acknowledge, guys. Acknowledge when there's difficulties. Acknowledge when there's a failure. Acknowledge when there's a mistake. Give feedback and ask for help. And keep reinforcing the vision. We have to make it the new part of our culture. It's our new culture. So we have to acknowledge everything, okay? The feedback from the team, how we're getting on in the change process, what the morale's like, why are people losing faith in the change process? Was it a couple of mistakes down the line? Did we not explain it? Did we rush something? Did we not give it time? Give feedback, take feedback, keep moving forward with it. And then, guys, when it comes to poor performance, change is always about behavior, so address poor performance from the outset. And just like you would address poor performance with a staff member that's not performing, we have to compare it to the rest of the company. So if the poor performance is coming from maybe one department or one individual, we have to put it in context with the rest of the company and say, look, everyone else has been putting in this extra effort and this, coming in with a positive attitude every day to implement their part of the change. And we feel like maybe your department or as an individual, we're not seeing the same thing. Can you explain why? What's going on? Is it a specific issue with your part of the change process? Because again, that communication, that respect is going to get people to either see if they're not performing or not buying into it or simply not implementing it and allow us to move forward. But we have to address it. People don't like to address poor performance. If we address it properly and professionally, it's not an issue. But we have to identify it and we have to address it. And again, it is about being very clear. Look, the rest of the company's doing this. Do you think you're putting in the same effort? Do you still believe in the culture? Do you believe in this change process? What do you not believe in it? Is it your specific department that there's too many changes and you come up with a plan? All right? And then praise and reward, guys. Celebrate success no matter how small. Have the team come up with the milestones and then hit them rewards along the line. Like, give them rewards, give them recognition. Both, remember? Remember how important rewards and recognition is? Thank people every day. Thank people every day. And when they should be rewarded, reward them. Okay? But again, that reward, it has to match the effort. And guys, if we do this effectively, it makes the change process a lot easier. And we're going to end up with a lot of new mentors and future leaders that are going to help us change. Okay? But it's only going to be successful if we communicate effectively. We have to communicate the what and the how in times of change. Okay, once we get through to the why, then the what and the how. Okay, so there's a few ways we can do it. Okay, number one is be truthful, spare no detail. So we as leaders may think we're doing our team members a favor by withholding certain details of how we plan to get to where we're going, but we're not. Transparent, 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 feedback, 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 new plan, new plan, new plan. Simple as that. Okay? If you don't give the details, teams are going to think you're either disorganized or you're hiding something. Okay, so explain the why, explain the what, explain the how, take the feedback, and continue with the process forward. Teams can easily feel overwhelmed. Okay, we only see 10% of people every day. They're hiding their stress a lot of the time. They're hiding the true impact. So we have to be aware of that. You have to be sensitive to those people around you. And you also don't know what's going on with other people's personal lives. So that change could add stress to already stress in their life, which we have to be able to recognize in staff. And if we're seeing poor performance, there's no point in jumping on people straight away without being empathetic and finding out why. Okay? So that's our opportunity to help people along and to build trust and to build value in them and make sure that that we end up with valued employees who really go above and beyond every day. Don't take silence as acceptance. We've all done it. Is that clear? And everyone says, yeah, no problem. And we move on. Make sure you're getting feedback from the team. Ask them to even perceive, explain what they see the change meaning to them. And make sure you elicit them for more feedback. In the morning huddles, in maybe the weekly meetings, in town halls with the whole company, whatever you need to do. But make sure you're getting lots of feedback on what it means for them. And get all the positive feedback. Get all the negative feedback. If we're not dealing with it, then we're not going to be able to implement the change properly. Communication is always a two-way street. So the goal is to get engagement. It's always to get engagement. Okay? Silence is not good. And lastly, guys, don't be using emails. In times of change, we have to get face-to-face. Daily meetings, weekly meetings, town halls on a weekly or bi-weekly basis if we need to do it. You have to get face-to-face with people. Individual meetings if needed. Provide the green space, provide the space for them to be able to plan out their change implementation and allow that to grow and develop and see it succeed. And then, guys, always show gratitude. Leaders must be thankful and show appreciation on a daily basis for people's hard work. Remember we talked about recognition and reward? 70% of employees see recognition, true, honest, genuine recognition, as more effective for motivating them and inspiring them than monetary rewards. What they're looking for is culture. What they're looking for is to be, feel valued as employees, and maybe a bit of flexibility. Be treated like adults. Too many places are treating employees like school kids. Do this, do that. You're bold because you didn't do this. You're bold because you didn't do that. You're dealing with adults. Now, if you want a load of successful adults and are going to work on their own initiative, you have to treat them like it. You have to trust them and you have to let them build it forward. And guys, to wrap up that lesson, I just want to look at, as leaders, how can we prepare for change? And before we do, make sure that we take some time to reflect on who will really be impacted by the change process that's occurring on really all three levels. One, for yourself. How are you going to deal with the change? What is your current change challenge in your own position? And what is your role as the change leader? And what do you need to do differently to make sure that it's successful within the organization with others? When it comes to others, how are you going to help people through the change process? How are you going to understand and respond to their different perspectives, feelings, responses? And how are you going to build relationships with people maybe that you haven't had relationships previously? Because we have to, again, walk the talk. So we have to get onto the organization floor and maybe start interacting with people that we haven't interacted with before. Okay? And then as an organization, how do we lead the change in context of the larger organization culture and politics that are already there? Are they changing our culture and politics? How do we forge a network of future mentors and leaders that are going to help that new change process, that new culture, those new politics? And how do we influence up and down and across the organization? Because we should really have the answers to all of these questions before we're implementing change. And if we don't have the answers to all these questions, we don't know how to successfully do it yet. Okay? So again, communication is key, guys. And it comes in small steps. You know, change in anything is about baby steps. 1% better every day. Get 1% better every day and enjoy the process. That's my saying, and always has been, in business, in personal life, in improving my life. And I think in business it works perfect. You know, leaders know that change comes from many forms. You know, little things can produce great outcomes. We have to identify the critical mass, those people that are going to influence the tipping points, those situations that are going to influence the tipping point to people accepting the change. We have to be ready to constantly adjust, be flexible, and, you know, replan, restructure the process if needs be. And we have to look for those opportunities of contagion that are going to become tipping points. Okay? Where are the little seeds of growth in each department that are really going to help us implement the whole thing? Okay? And then, you know, we need to take steps to learn through the process. We have to be really, you know, taking that feedback, acknowledging the feedback, responding to that feedback in a way that's going to positively help us with the change management. And we're implementing the change as a whole, so it all aligns to the same vision, and we all actually get to where we want to be in the first place. Yeah? So guys, you know, there's no secret, there's no quick success, there's no magic pill, there's no nothing. It is about communication, taking feedback, you know, being adjustable where you need to be, responding to poor performance and the realities of how people are feeling, and be able to deal with all that, and keep everyone on a positive nature. Yeah? And if you put across your vision and your change process passionately enough, clearly enough, transparently enough, people will believe in it, and then it's just a case of not only getting their buy-in, but continuing to have their trust throughout the change process.